Have you heard about blockchain and maybe cryptocurrency? And have you thought about it as something that, either crazy rich people or really smart hackers are into, and that maybe it's not actually impacting your life, or at least not yet? Well, today we're going to be looking at why blockchain will change everything and have a really powerful conversation with a really interesting and well-informed person who I'm going to introduce you to, who's going to actually help us realize that blockchain is already sweeping the world and changing our lives in ways that we may not even realize yet. We would just be starting to feel, and down the road we'll understand. But this is a powerful movement, and if you're like me, you want to learn more about it. So that said, let's dive into why blockchain will change everything. Welcome, my friends. We are here today in the virtual studio, which basically just means we're on the same planet and we're connected, with my longtime friend, Dominic Hrabe, who is going to share with us his actually very interesting story of how he became an expert on blockchain and cryptocurrency, but also really enlighten us. And even just in the brief conversations I've had with him about the subject already, I feel worlds smarter than I did even just a few weeks ago. So he's going to just drop so much wisdom on us, and I'm so excited to have him here. Without further ado, Dominic, welcome to the studio.
Jeff, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for taking time to do this. This is fantastic.
Yes, no, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so grateful that we, through pure serendipity, reconnected over the last several weeks after years of I guess if you love someone, set them free, and if they come back, they're yours forever. So we must really love each other.
That's a good way of putting it. I like it. I haven't heard that in a while, but I like that.
I'm feeling the love, because last time you and I were really in close conversation, and we were kind of involved in some things, was earlier in my digital marketing career. And you were, and I don't want to put, words to your life experience, but I would say at that time you were kind of a dabbler in digital marketing and this, progressive new economy kind of stuff. And I think you were still actually working full-time as a pharmacist, correct?
I was, yeah. I was working as a pharmacist. I was actually working for a managed care organization, which anybody who's in the medical industry understands what that is. A managed care organization essentially is kind of an integrated pharmacy with a medical benefits insurance company. Right. Okay. So I was working for one of those. Yep.
And that was, gosh, we were in Phoenix. We were hanging out. We were talking. That was maybe what, 6 or 7, 8, 10 years ago?
I was just thinking about that. And I want to say it was right around 2013. Okay. Actually, 2012. It had to be 2012. Yeah.
Okay. So 8 years ago. And now here we've circled back. Obviously, I was at a digital marketing event recently to network, and I've gone full bore into the new economy. I do digital marketing, I do real estate, I do online education. That's my life and my passion, at my evangelism, if you will, at this point. I was at this event to network and gratefully, pick up some nice awards, which was cool. And lo and behold, I bump into my old pharmacist friend who's come so far. And not only that, I didn't just bump into you in the lobby, but I actually met you at a dinner that was, not to pat our own backs too much, but it was a dinner supposedly for really successful, quasi-important people at this event, right? Mm-hmm. And we bumped into each other, and it was like, for me, I was like, A, it's so great to see you, but B, you've clearly had a massive career shift to be at this dinner. Correct. And I was excited to hear about it, and you told me about it. And, in whatever way you think is relevant to my audience, why don't you tell them about it? And before you do that, let me tell you why I'm asking. My audience and the message that I think they tune into me for is all about how the world has changed. There's to call it a new paradigm probably doesn't even do it justice. I mean, right. In the last 20 years, 10 years, the world has been completely upended from the standpoint of what are the opportunities out there for people to go out into the world and not just make a living, but really make a life for themselves.
Right.
Through investing, through entrepreneurship, through business, through the internet, through just everything has changed in the last 10 years. And yet most people, because the educational system hasn't really caught up, they've still been kind of trained and set on a few paths, you know, that are more traditional, they're more corporate, they're more employment based. And I'm just out there trying to shake it all up, right? And so when I meet my old pharmacist friend who's now doing all this crazy stuff that you're doing, I'm like, yes, perfect example of how when people embrace the way the world has gone, there's just so much opportunity. So with that as a frame, if you wouldn't mind, catch us up on your life, like you did for me a few weeks ago.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. And yeah, I guess I'll start with when I actually became a pharmacist, which was 2005. The pharmacists were in such high demand that the joke is that we could throw, you know, a dart at a map and hit any zip code in the US and fall into a six-figure salary, right? That was the model then. That was the paradigm then, right? And then what I noticed was as I started going into the workforce that my capacity was around 400 to 500 prescriptions a day as a pharmacist. And that was kind of about the max capacity that you could eke out of a pharmacist. And then a few years later, starting into maybe 2008, 2009, 2010, I started to notice that the model was shifting and these companies were now starting to get 1,000. The benchmark was 1,000 prescriptions a day. Now they're doing that but we're making the same amount of money, right? And we're not only required to do 1,000 a day, like that was the benchmark. That was where if you didn't get 1,000 a day, you worked until you got 1,000 a day.
Right.
So now because of technology's, you know, essentially doubling our capacity. So what's going to happen to the demand, right? So it's gonna alter that dramatically. So I started to see what was going on around me and realizing that, hey, listen, I can't be so secure in this six-figure a year income job. I need to start thinking outside the box and preparing for an eventual outcome where I'm not reliant on that, right? So fast forward to 2012, which is when you and I met, and I had a friend of mine that in and around that time he had started telling me about this thing called Bitcoin. And, you know, I was probably a little bit more libertarian leaning in my political philosophy. But even then I couldn't understand it. I couldn't wrap my head around Bitcoin and this, you know, it was just an ethereal concept to me. And so one of the things I do remember is Bitcoin was right around $30 at the time. And I didn't take action, even after he had suggested, hey, you should probably, you know, consider, you know, diversifying some of your income into this, you know, it'd be a good idea for you. And so I didn't. And so that was 2012. Fast forward 2 years later. And I had another friend, and these two friends did not know each other. I had another friend call me and had just left a conference. And it was actually the friend that introduced us just this last week. He had just came back from a conference and was, you know, elated, excited, telling me all about Bitcoin and blockchain and how it's so necessary. And I thought to myself, I'm like, well, I have another friend that told me about this 2 years ago. Maybe I should get these guys on the phone. So we get on the phone together and it's just kind of like putting one nerd with another nerd and just letting them talk it out. And I'm just sitting in the background thinking, okay, maybe I should pay attention now. Well, at that time, Bitcoin was now $600. So it 20x'd in 2 years. And in retrospect, that 2 years of waiting has cost me over $3 million at present prices. So was that a big mistake? It was an enormous mistake of not taking action. But how you are when you see, you know, somebody tells you to go see a movie and then another friend goes and tells you to see that same movie. Now it's almost now you're listening. You didn't listen to the first one, but now it's like, okay, I'm hearing this a second time, a third time. I need to take action on this. So I ended up taking some action. And this is 2014. Bitcoin's right around $600. But what does something do when I buy it? It goes down in price. Right. I bought it at 600. It drops to like 100 or 200 and I forget all about it. I just chalk it up to another lost investment. And so I forget about it. A couple of years later, I'm on Facebook and I'm seeing my feed just blow up. You know, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, you know, it's all the rage. And I'm like, what's going on with this, right? So at that time, the price was, I think, at like $2,300, $2,400, maybe $2,500, somewhere around that region. And finally, I was like, okay, I need to understand this. In 2014, when I first invested in it, I just took a leap of faith for my friends. I didn't bother to really dig into the technology and understand it. And as somebody who doesn't really have a technical background, a lot of the technical talk of it just kind of went over my head. So it very much overwhelmed me. So I started just learning what I could every single day. I'd read a little bit here, read a little bit here, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day. If I found an article that I didn't quite understand a terminology, I'd Google it, find out what it was until I did understand it.
And when was this about?
So this is 2016 into 2017. So probably.
Are you still working as a pharmacist at this time?
I'm still working as a pharmacist at the time. And I do have a business on the side with a couple partners that we were working on something in the medical industry.
Okay.
And so what was going on is then, Bitcoin continues to go up, and it gets into the bull market that we all know that it went through. And I start kind of just understanding and diversifying a little bit from Bitcoin and some of the other different, what we call, well, I won't call them that because they're just altcoins. Okay.
Right.
So there's another name that some of us in the industry affectionately call it, but I'll save that for your viewers. But,
okay.
So we get into 2017 and I go to my partners in the medical side and I say, listen, I don't know what we need to do, but we need to do something in this ecosystem. The business that we were in was just kind of fledgling and going nowhere. And so I think we really need to put some time and attention into this. And like I said, I don't know what it is, but let's do something. And so we thought around. Well, none of us are really technical in that regard. So we're not necessarily going to develop something.
Right.
But we really thought that this ecosystem, this industry of blockchain technology has the potential to do what the internet did back in the 80s and 90s, and creating the next wave of billionaires and, the luminaries that we talk about, the Bezos and Bill Gates and, Steve Jobs and all those guys that everybody knows their name, right? They're pervasive. And so we were convinced that 10 years, 20 years from now, that we're going to look back on our existence and those names are going to be born from this industry. And so how do we get on the inside track of that? How do we get in the inside track of this technology and how it develops? And so we're like, okay, well, let's do a conference. Let's bring them to us. There are all these conferences going on out there and they're speaking at different conferences. And a lot of the conferences are boring, but they're still, educational and stuff like that. So let's just kind of add our own flair to it. And so we did. So we created World CryptoCon. And none of us had any event experience. None of us had any experience of blockchain, but we did it. So we just threw out, we invested in we self-funded our company, lost money the first year. Have no shame in admitting that we lost a significant amount of money the first year, but we survived and we were able to survive to year two. And in year one, we were successful enough to have 1,200 people there at a major Las Vegas hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. And so we had, I want to say, over 100 sponsors. We had over 100 speakers. And it was a raging success, as far as, delivering quality content to the marketplace. And in the process of doing that, Jeff, I could probably write a book on everything that I learned, in that process.
Yeah. Events, that's a whole other business model that's very sophisticated.
Correct. And it's, I look as an investor, I look into companies, investing in companies that are capital efficient, and come to find out that this is one of the most capital inefficient companies you could ever do. It's very, you're paying, $120 for a pot of coffee at the hotel because they know that,
especially on the Strip in Vegas.
Oh yeah. Insane. And if anybody's been to
events, I do my events off Strip in Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. And you're smart. So we did that the first year. And then the second year we created what's known as Vegas Blockchain Week. So instead of just doing 2 days of content, we did a full week's worth of content. Proud to say that we had Dr. Ron Paul speak at the
You did that your second year?
Second year.
So you lost money in 2 days. So you tripled down and extended it to 6 or 7 days.
Yep.
And went bigger.
Yeah, we went bigger because one of the things we economically from, when you secure a space, they actually don't charge you for the space. A lot of people don't know that. They charge you in other different ways. They make you say that, hey, you're going to absorb 1,000 room nights.
Right. Yeah, it's about hitting minimums across food and beverage.
Right.
And rooms.
Bingo. Yeah. So that's really what we're on the hook for. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is, hey, we wanted to add content, add valuable content to the ecosystem. And so we could do that. We could only do so much in 2 days, but something that, your viewers may understand about the blockchain space is that there's a lot of different, what they call protocols, right? So there's Bitcoin, which is a protocol. There's Litecoin, which is a protocol. There's Ethereum, which is a protocol. So each one of those protocols have an identity. They have an ecosystem. They have a fervent group of supporters,
right, right.
developers, right?
They have their own culture.
They have their own culture. Exactly. It's like a Fortune 500 company that's got their own, employees, but they're not employees. Mm-hmm. So Litecoin Foundation came on and wanted to participate. And a few other different organizations came on and wanted to have their own event inside of Vegas Blockchain Week. And so we had this aha, and we're like, oh, maybe we should do something like that, where now we bring in pretty much the entire ecosystem, right? And so we did that in year 2 at the Cosmopolitan, had over 2,000 people there, again, over 100 sponsors, over 100 speakers, going for 4 days. Ron Paul was included, one of the speakers, and, it was a raging success. So we did a lot better year 2. And now we're getting geared up for year 3 and seeing where this industry is really going. It's now we're coming back into a bull market, which we did all of those in a bear market, which is kind of surprising. And in retrospect, it's very surprising that we're still alive, but here we are.
Well, it's to me, it's not surprising that you're still alive, because, I get to be almost a laboratory, my life, both personally and because of, all the budding entrepreneurship that I'm surrounded by all the time. I get to be this big giant laboratory to test hypotheses about starting things and seeing them through, right? And the energy that you've described to me about, listen, you lost money, so you went from 2 days to 6 days. That's a counterintuitive shift for most people who don't understand energy. Mm-hmm. and who don't understand the economics of the event business model, right? Like you said, with the minimums and stuff. But there's a certain sort of je ne sais quoi to the way you're describing this. 3 medical people who have no background in blockchain or putting on live events, going in, doing it once, barely scraping by, losing money, doing it again, tripling down, going bigger. You guys are the wellspring, the energy. You guys are the Energizer bunnies that have pushed this into being. And you're not a one-off, and I'm not a one-off. I get to see this happening all the time. It's if you want extraordinary, you take ordinary and you add something extra, right? That's what we're talking. My kids, I don't know if do you have teenagers?
I do. I have a stepdaughter who's 18.
Does she ever tell you, like, Dad, you're so extra?
It doesn't say that.
So my teen, maybe it's a Utah thing, but they use the word extra as like a kind of pejorative adjective for like over the top. And like, I take it as a compliment that like that my kids will be like, Dad, you're so extra. And you're damn right. Yeah. And that's why my shit works, and you just described being extra.
Well, it's been, and having gone through it now, as you know, and building any sort of business, Jeff, it's hard, like hard. I would have never imagined it would have been that difficult, but was, especially doing an event and going 60 days before it and not knowing that you're going to fill your room block.
Oh, the event model.
And everybody tells you, like, nobody buys tickets until 60 days before. Well, that's nice to know before you get into the business, but especially when you're self-funding and you're bootstrapping and you're not sitting on $1 million in cash.
Right.
And so, being able to, pull this thing off 2 years in a row without any outside equity investment has been it's been a miracle. It's been an absolute miracle. And now one of the things that was interesting too, Jeff, from year 1 to year 2 was year 1, I couldn't so I booked the speakers, right? So I bring, I determine whether in part, I determine whether the speaker speaks or the speaker doesn't, Mm-hmm. And so, I get all these applications coming in and whatnot, but the first year I'm all looking for the speakers,
right?
I'm trying to find them. And obviously you need A grade. The higher the profile, the more likely you're going to sell tickets, right? You can't have a lot of people that nobody really recognizes their names. They may have great content, but just, they're not going to really sell tickets, right? And so, the first year I couldn't pay somebody to respond to my LinkedIn message.
Right.
Right. Now, year 2, I'm getting literally connections, offers left and right. And that's the difference between—
You had Ron Paul at the second year, right?
Yeah. And I can't take credit for recruiting Ron Paul because that was part of the Litecoin Foundation. They're the ones that secured him. But I mean,
But you're the one that secured them.
Yeah, and I secured, we had a top economist from the IMF to come speak at our conference. Yeah. We've had, people from Wall Street, high profile people from Wall Street, the entire ecosystem. Anthony Pompliano, who's got over 270,000 Twitter followers. He's one of the top, thought leaders in the entire ecosystem. So getting those guys to come speak at your conference, and women, the second year was night and day compared to year one. And so that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. I mean, so first of all, congratulations on an amazing, an amazing show of some deep truths about certainty and enthusiasm and self-belief and drive and just all this amazing stuff that I think is frankly as important as blockchain.
Yeah.
Like to the individual person. And my mission is very simple. I want to help the average person have an above average life. I mean, in not so many words. And to that person, the things that you're talking about now about how you are every bit as important as the stuff that I want to get into, which is talking about blockchain and how it's impacting the world. But I didn't want to just gloss over this stuff because, one of the things I talk a lot about is like you just described, when you're starting something, you have to be the certainty to the point of contagion. So, because everybody else is going to meet you with doubt when it's a new thing.
Absolutely.
And if you have doubt, your doubt's not going to win over their doubt. Your certainty, even your certainty is going to struggle to win over their doubt. It almost has to be an irrational certainty.
It's got to be irrational.
To the point where people are like, Dominic, dude, what are you doing? This doesn't make sense. And you're like, yes, exactly. Now watch me.
I had so many people that were like, wait, you're just kind of like you. Wait, you're a pharmacist and you're putting on this event. And, we actually did the event and people are coming to us. They're like, so how many of these have you guys done? Yeah. We're like, never. This is our first one. And they're like, are you crazy? You literally, you're here at the Aria, which is, one of the top 5, hotels in the entire in Las Vegas. And you're putting on this big of an event. How many are on your crew? Like how many are on your team? We're like, 5. And they couldn't see it, and one of the other things too, I think, Jeff, that was so impactful and so necessary for us getting to do it was being resourceful. I think that was, if it wasn't for that, there's no way it would have happened. And, we started to notice that in the first 90 days after deciding, and committing to actually doing this event, is that things started to fall into place, like very weirdly. Like, we needed a resource here. Oh, I know somebody who knows somebody who's got that. We need a resource here. Oh, I know somebody who knows somebody who's got that. We need a resource here. Oh, I know somebody who's got that, who can help us with that. And those things just started to line up. And it was so surreal. And that's like, when you're doing that, it just feels like you're on the right path. Like you're being guided. And it decisions followed by unwavering follow-through. Correct.
Key to life.
Yep.
The unifying factor of all the stories of massive success and seemingly improbable achievement, decision.
Correct.
And unwavering follow-through.
Could not agree more.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. So man, we have, without any planning, we have touched on so much cool stuff. One thing I want to talk about that you mentioned at the very beginning, as to kind of where you were at in your mind as a pharmacist. You talked about, because I think this is going to speak to every person out there, and it also speaks to the blockchain conversation itself. But it's this dynamic in the economy where you said that as technology increases capacity, it increases the supply, the supply of services based on the number of service providers, right? And I've talked in the past about how this affects insurance and affects real estate. Like if you have 20,000 insurance agents in a market, and now some new computer program comes out that allows them to all underwrite twice as many policies. Well, now technically you only need 10,000 insurance agents, and either all of them are going to have a crappy business, or half of them are going to go out of business. So the other half can have the same business, right? That's happening across virtually every industry.
Every industry. No industry safe.
Yeah. And so people that are in service businesses or even employees, we love technology because it makes our jobs easier.
Correct.
But we need to realize technology also makes our jobs more
Absolutely.
expendable or more bloated in terms of us even having a job in many. And so
I think you know, going along that vein a little bit is that, you know, we always think that, you know, maybe the blue collar jobs are the ones that are, you know, most maybe at risk for being disintermediated or, you know, made obsolete. What we don't understand is that, I mean, look, pharmacist, right? You look at a pharmacist, you're thinking, oh God, yeah, that person's going to have a job for their entire career. Not so. I mean, literally all it's going to take is a shift from the state boards of pharmacy to say, you know what, we have an AI that can do it better, and now you're no longer needed, right? And that shift, that doesn't happen in a day. It happens over a period of you know, a decade, maybe 2 decades, maybe not even a decade. But then when it does happen, it's going to be so shocking to that marketplace, and those people who have not prepared themselves to, you know, diversify their talents and skills into something else, and now they got to retool. Well, I mean, that's going to be a big rude awakening, and not just for pharmacists. I'm talking about for everybody. If there's one thing that I'll say is that if you're not focused on being the best that you possibly can be, whether it's that discipline or learning an additional discipline or, you know, whatever it is, you're going to get disrupted. And I tell my daughter this. My daughter she's 10, and you know, I say, listen, you're not competing with the girl down the street. You know, you're competing with the girl in China, in India, and everywhere else. And one of my mentors that I listen to, who you know, I don't know him, but I've read his book, so I call him one of my mentors. I listen to every word he says, is Ray Dalio. And what Ray Dalio says, and he's the, you know, for people who don't know who he is, he's the CIO, and I think he's essentially transitioning away from his company, but he's got the largest hedge fund in the world. Like over 160 billion assets under management, and multi-billionaire himself. And he just wrote the book Principles. And what he says is that writing algorithms, in other words, coding, is the reading and writing of tomorrow. That no longer is reading and writing adequate. Yep. You need to either, you don't necessarily need to be a coder, but you need to understand it enough to be able to guide and direct. Yeah. You know, so in creation of an algorithm, right? And so, you know, that's where we're going. And if we don't start adapting our own skill set towards that, then we're going to make ourselves obsolete.
And you nailed it. It's the 6-figure specialist that is the most at risk from technology. Yep. Because they've created that 6-figure value for themselves by becoming narrowly good. Not broadly okay, but narrowly good.
Especially.
Which means the day that technology can do their job even a little bit better than them, the company's not saving $40,000. The company's saving $150,000 to replace them. Sure. So the company's licking its chops. Meanwhile, they've spent 20 years going down a path that now, and they've got a $700,000 house with a mortgage, and they've created a lifestyle, and they've set a plane up here. They have to redirect at 50.
Correct.
It's brutal. And that's what's happening. I mean, you know, I talked to a guy, and not to go off track, but I talked to a guy who was the 8th person ever hired at Microsoft. I don't want to share his name, but he grew a multi-billion-dollar business unit at Microsoft. He's on a, you know, speed dial basis with Bill Gates. Super smart guy. I talked to him about four years ago, probably. And I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. And he told me straight up, education is where the opportunity is because of this, and this. Just like, you know, we need to educate young people differently. We need to re-educate older people because of all these other economic dynamics. And that, you know, that was a big part of why I've started Entra, a non-traditional education company. But anyways, it's just,
we need to retool our workforce, right? We need to retool them. Because
you and I, we're here kind of sounding an alarm, and I don't want to be like dramatic, but like if we accomplish that in this video, I want to talk about blockchain, but if all we do is like ripple a few 6-figure guys into being like, okay, I have to diversify my knowledge base, I think we'll be serving the planet.
No doubt.
And serving some families out there. And props to you for taking your own initiative, dude. I mean, look at you. Like, it's such a cool example, you know?
Honestly, it was based off of, it was like, I look back on it too, Jeff, and it was partially based on greed, right? Because you wanted, hey, there's got to be a financial incentive. There's always going to be a financial incentive.
My therapist would tell you that it was actually self-interest, and it's very, very healthy.
Yeah, self-interest, okay. And then fear, because I was fearful that I was going to get left behind, because I'm seeing the doubling capacity in my industry, right? Of one person that they're now doubling their capacity, and it's kind of like Moore's law. It's gonna go from 1,000 prescriptions to 2,000 prescriptions, and so on and so on. Well, they're still pumping out pharmacists. So guess what? I'm gonna either at the maximum be made obsolete. At the minimum, I'm just gonna have a declining in living standards.
Right.
Essentially, they're gonna lower my income to the point where it's not gonna be worth it.
And you're gonna be competing with 27-year-olds.
Exactly, right? Yeah. Who are faster and more efficient than me, right?
Yeah. And so it's where was I? Lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's so cool that you figured that out. And I know what I was going to say. And it's I think thankfully you were in an industry that had a very simple quantifiable metric to sort of standardize performance, like 400 scripts a day versus 1,000. A lot of high end professional industries don't necessarily have the same, like the practice of law. Correct. Doesn't have a simple baseline quantifiable standard like that. So it's probably harder for those people to see. But like, I just read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, and it was talking about aberrance and human error in the legal process as kind of one of its core threads that it followed. I could literally see and they actually have computer simulations that are better now than judges at predicting whether or not people should be granted bail. And and in that case, there's a real cost, because they say when we let the judges do it, more people die.
Well, think about it too. There's an emotional element. If you're looking at pure logic, right? What's better at it? I was just reading this article earlier today. Software, right? We are getting increasingly more reliant and trusting of software, because it's yes or no, it's binary, right? The outcomes are binary, and there's no emotional involvement, there's no political involvement, there's nothing like that. No, the decision cannot be influenced. It's binary, it's yes or no. And that's kind of the thing that kind of leads into blockchain, which is very similar into how blockchain is going to pretty much, disrupt so many different.
So let's use that as the pivot point into the blockchain conversation. Like the nerd in me, the evangelist in me is like wanting to talk about what we've been talking about. The nerd in me is like, can we please talk about blockchain? How is it going to change the world? And so let's indulge my nerd here and say, okay, first of all, I'm going to give you a tall order here, but in as straightforward and simplified a way as possible, can you give a general overview for anyone who may not fully understand what blockchain really is, Because I think a lot of people hear Bitcoin and they hear cryptocurrency. Right. They don't understand that Bitcoin is actually just one tentacle of technology called blockchain.
So if you look at Bitcoin was the first use case of blockchain technology, okay? A blockchain is essentially nothing more than a distributed ledger, right? It'd be like your QuickBooks file, right? Mm-hmm. On 1,000, 1 million different computers out there that we all share the one main ledger, the one main QuickBooks file, and we all share it, right? So when I want to send Jeff, $10, right? First of all the ledgers are going to show how much is in my account. So
kind of like a Google sheet almost.
It's like a shared Google sheet that's just, everybody's got access to.
Right.
But it's encrypted. Okay. So there's encryption. And so the computers just communicate with one another and say, yes, Dominic has $10. He can send that $10. If I didn't have that $10, I wouldn't be able to send it because there's copies of it all around the entire network. Okay.
Right.
So, and because they're all encrypted. So that eliminated that groundbreaking innovation, which was created by Satoshi Nakamoto, who nobody knows the true identity of. Because they've been trying to have a digital e-cash before. The cypherpunk movement of the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, they created digital cash, but they weren't able to eliminate that issue, that what they call a double spend problem. right? So the double spend problem, meaning I can send $10 here and $10 here, and I only have $10 and I can send it simultaneously. That's a problem.
Because
right?
the systems aren't all communicating in real time to go, wait, hold on.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So what Satoshi did was absolutely freaking brilliant. And if I ever got a tattoo in my life, I'd get a tattoo of him. So him or them or her or whoever it is.
Right.
So he took a currency that has a defined input and a defined output. Right. So what I mean by that is that, you took the form of electricity in mining, created essentially the process of mining, and they call it mining just because it's analogous to gold, right? You dig gold up from the ground, and now you have this finite, secure, scarce substance that now we can transact it. And that's why a lot of people are kind of referring to Bitcoin as digital gold, right? So it's because it's taking an input, creating value in it. It's a scarce element, and now I can transact value over a trusted network. That's essentially what Bitcoin is. Now, Bitcoin's one use case of blockchain. Blockchain it's now having impact in the supply chain. It's having impact in medical records. It's having impact in automotive, in mobility and transport. I mean, you name it. And so one of the things that I had heard that is good for, viewers to kind of draw a line in the sand is that blockchain is inherently secure. Okay. If you look at the internet was created on a communication protocol. It's a communication protocol. It's very effective at you and I having this conversation right now. Me sending an email, you sending an email back, and, send and receive. It's very good at communication, but it's terrible at security. Right. It's not a secure protocol. Blockchain is built secure. It's inherently secure. So whereas the communication protocol has had to have all these security protocols or security elements duct taped around it to make it fit. I mean, that's why we have all these hacks, loss of, Equifax and Aetna and all these different huge Fortune 500 companies that are storing large amounts of our data and are getting hacked because they're a central repository of that data. Blockchain, there's no single point of failure. You can't break it. Right. So you can break some blockchains if they were not as secure. But like, for instance, the Bitcoin blockchain, it's virtually unhackable. So like nobody could really hack it. And that's why as it continues to grow bigger and bigger and bigger, now it's in its early days, in its infancy, could you hack it? Absolutely. But it wasn't big enough. There was no reason to hack it. Right now it's getting so big and so secure because the mining power that is going into this to secure the network is in the billions of dollars. Right.
So it's like at some point you could have hacked into blockchain or hacked into Bitcoin because it existed across maybe 100 computers.
Correct.
Now it exists across 100 million computers.
100 million, and those computers aren't just like your laptop.
Right.
They're server farms. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and they're in, different jurisdictions throughout the world.
Right.
So now, even if you shut down 1 or 10 or 100, guess what? There's still 1,000 more, 8,000 more, 12,000 more. Right. It's just, you can't, there's no central point of failure.
And so for my audience out there who, I like your analogy of comparing it to the internet, if you ever set up a website, that like, first of all, you can't even accept payments on your website unless you go do what? Install an SSL certificate. So it's like everything on the internet is fundamentally, has fundamental liability and insecurity. And then you try to overlay security on top of it. You try to come in the back door and redo it to be safe. Whereas what you're saying is blockchain, you would never need to put an SSL certificate on it because it was already built to be that in the first place.
Bingo, right? And the other thing too, there's a misnomer out there that a lot of people are like, well, I've heard about Mt. Gox and I've heard about these different, hacks. Well, yes, there have been exchanges that have been hacked. Okay. Right. What is an exchange? It's a central repository, right? Right. So people are leaving access to their, what we call keys on an exchange. And that exchange is that's a honeypot. It's a honeypot
Right.
for hackers. So now hackers can hack that and steal all your Bitcoins.
And correct
right?
me if I'm wrong, but the vaults, so to speak, that got hacked, those were cold storage facilities, right? Meaning they weren't actually part of the larger decentralized network. They were like boxes that somebody could break into.
Well, in the case of Mt. Gox, that guy who owned it was, not to go off on a tangent, but he just was ill-equipped as a fiduciary of those funds. And so he did not have proper security elements in place. And so a lot of people lost a lot of money. And those were in the early days. That was like 2014,
right.
2015, if I'm not mistaken. But now, so long as you have proper security built in as far as the storing of your own Bitcoin, you can't literally you can back it up into what's called a seed phrase, which is essentially a string of 12 letters or 12 words, right? That as long as you memorize those, you can have infinite access to your own Bitcoin, right? And so nobody can hack it. Nobody can hack it. So I could go from here, I could fly to Singapore, I could go to whatever, and I can literally log on and into my cold wallet and I can access my Bitcoin.
To me, it's almost like the way the ATM networks work, where like if somebody hacking Bitcoin would have, at this point, would effectively be the equivalent of trying to steal all the money out of all the ATMs in the world at the exact same time.
Correct.
It's that fragmented in a positive, decentralized way, right?
Not only that, but if let's just say that this could happen, right? And it could happen conceivably. But if they were to hack it, it would immediately destroy the value of Bitcoin. So now you're hacking something to destroy the value of it. So the incentives aren't aligned, right?
Yeah, it's like burning up a box of money so that you can get the money out, and it's just a bunch of cash. Yeah,
correct.
That's a great point too. So we started with the premise of why blockchain will change everything. I feel like we're touching on why it's going to change everything, because this idea that the security is built into the platform. I have friends over the last several years, and I've been approached with startup ventures and, hey, do you want to invest in this? And or just smart people. I'm like, hey, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I'm tackling this one problem. And it was around making medical records electronic, digitizing medical records, right? So there's like, I'm building software. I'm trying to give hospitals all around the world access to medical records. But the fundamental problems that they always bump into are security-based,
correct,
privacy-based, right? It's people's health information. And it's literally, I've been hearing people talk about electronic medical records, and I've for a decade, probably over a decade. And I've literally probably been approached by 5 different startups that are all trying to tackle this problem. And it seems to me that they're all trying to tackle a problem that actually has a bigger problem, which is the internet, like you said, is fundamentally insecure.
Correct.
So my guess is blockchain changes that. It changes the whole conversation. And I'm guessing, I have nothing to back this up, so I'm asking you, would it be fair to say that blockchain will be the first domino that has to fall to actually result in a real electronic medical record system that everybody can trust?
So first, what's going to happen is, and so one of the issues inherently with electronic, or EMRs, as we call them, is that there's no standardization. There's this vendor and this vendor and this vendor and this vendor, and everybody's using different vendors, right? So there's no interoperability. Okay, so it's kind of like, I speak English, he speaks Chinese, he speaks Portuguese, she speaks Spanish. So everybody's speaking a different technical language, right? And so every EMR is different, is speaking a different language. What has to happen is there's got to be some kind of consortium that creates a standard, right? And if that thing is built on blockchain, how it will work is something like, I open up my phone, right? And I have all of my electronic medical record data on my phone in an app, okay? That's secure, that's encrypted, okay? Now I walk into, I walk into my family practice's office. I already have all my data. I walk into a new doctor. I share that with them.
So you could like scan a QR code on your phone.
They can scan the QR code and immediately have my full medical record data. Full. Right. But only they have it. And guess what? They pay me for it.
Nice.
They pay me for it. It's my data, right?
And this is probably programmed to self-destruct in 2 hours.
Yes, exactly. You can just give it to them for a finite amount of time as well, right?
Right.
So this is where this whole thing with Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica thing is really great, because it's now starting to kind of shine the spotlight on people's data, right? I'm giving my data for free, and they're utilizing it to monetize me, right? So why don't I just monetize my own data? My data is valuable, right? Your data is valuable. Everybody's data is valuable. And blockchain is going to be a ledger that's going to allow you to monetize your own data. And digital identity or medical records is going to be just one utilization of that, one use case.
So your credit, your health data, your social profile data, your insurance data, your financial portfolio, if it's all housed in platforms that are they're inherently encrypted, and you're the key holder,
I'm the key holder,
then nobody accesses it unless they borrow or rent the key from you.
Same thing like this whole biometric stuff. When I have an old iPhone, right? I have the one where you have to use a thumbprint, now it's the face and stuff. But yeah, nobody can have access to it unless that key is unlocked by my biometric data, right? So yes, like for instance, how, the whole applying for a home loan, how archaic is that? I have to submit this paper and this paper, and I got to sign this and I got to sign that. And to do it with multiple lenders, it's like, it's insane. It's an exercise in futility. It could be so much easier. And that's where you literally have all your data stored. You have your credit profile, you have everything literally in an app, and boom, I can port that over to a broker or whoever instantaneously. And they pay me for it. Now, I'm not saying they pay me a lot for it, but they pay me a little bit because now they have access to all my data.
And it's not just that it's inefficient, it's also subject to fraud. I mean, we had an entire, the entire global economy was almost brought down basically by the mortgage industry, essentially doing these stated income and no doc loans where people were just lying on the applications.
Well, the irony of all that is that Bitcoin was a referendum on that, is it was created right after the entire global financial crisis in 2009, right? That's when it was created.
That's fascinating, because it does, you apply it in reverse and say, if we had been running on a blockchain system, that whole problem couldn't have happened. But what's great about it is that it did happen, and it brought this into play, because if the global financial crisis had never occurred, who knows? We probably wouldn't have blockchain technology. Satoshi wouldn't have gotten laid off from his job at the factory or whatever and been like, I got to crack this thing.
Exactly.
And this is so powerful and so fascinating. And trust me, I am going to be blowing you up in coming months about how I can at least be present, if not involved somehow, in Blockchain Week. Because I want to learn, and I also want to be a conduit for this information to my community at Entra, because we're a community of understanding the new economy and how all the opportunities, what the opportunities are and how to take advantage of them. And to me, there's I think the whole CBD thing and legalized marijuana, that's huge.
It's huge.
This is probably even bigger.
Oh yeah, I believe so. I believe this is not to try to compare and contrast, but think about it. This has applications or implications or both for every industry out there.
Everything, yeah.
For everything. It's going to change. For instance, I was just reading an article that there's now $1 billion locked in what's called decentralized finance, which we refer to it as DeFi. DeFi is a blockchain app, is enabled by blockchain, and it's essentially distributing the financial industry. So now, like this whole example I shared with you on getting a home equity line of credit approved in 2 days and funded in 5 days, it's because of decentralized finance. It's a form of decentralized finance that is enabled by blockchain. So there's now over $1 billion locked inside of that capsule in that industry already. And that's just going to grow and grow and grow.
Which is like a tiny sliver, I would suspect, of where it's going to go.
Oh God, yeah. That's just within the last 2 years, Jeff.
Yeah.
2 years, there's been $1 billion invested into decentralized finance applications. And now all Wall Street is starting to take notice. TD Ameritrade, Fidelity, they're all coming in and building blockchain ecosystems.
So I feel like there's a whole other conversation that I almost don't even dare tread into, because we'll be here for hours. but around, okay, the banking system and the traditional mainstream financial institutions and all of the brinksmanship, you know, and maneuvering that they've done to, they're sort of like, they're politicking over here legislatively to try to slow it down. They're politicking over here to try to discredit it in the mainstream. Meanwhile, they're over here in the, you know, behind the scenes building all this infrastructure so that they're trying to slow it down so that they can get their arms around it and control it, I'm sure. Correct. Right? That's why Jamie Dimon did his big flip-flop.
And that's also why Bitcoin is such a big deal. It is such a big deal. And I don't think people really understand how big of a deal it is. People just see the ticker on CNBC and you know, the headlines, the news headlines, and it's this price, it's that price. Forget about it. Forget about all that noise and just understand the technology. Do what I did and just take 10 minutes out of your day and just learn a little bit more about it every single day. And gradually you'll start to come to the realization that this is so much bigger than just a price. It's so much bigger than just a speculation. It's so much bigger than any of that. It's humongous.
It's kind of like, I think of where Netflix was at a certain point where they had been like, man, we killed Blockbuster. Now we're shipping all the DVDs. And then they're like, oh shit, streaming. They're not shipping anything. They're just serving it up. Correct. And Netflix, they were smart. They accepted it. They leaned into it. Now they're a big streaming service, but they could have done what Blockbuster did and said, no, that, you know, dug their heels in and been old school. But, and I think you're right. In a way, there is so much money in this world and just so many people whose entire nest eggs right now are, and not just nest eggs, but livelihoods in general and work lives. And, you know, I think in a way we're talking about the same things. What Entre talks about in terms of what you do with your time every day and how you go to work, you're talking about what, you know, what you do with your data and what you do with your money. But it's all about opening up to the way the world is changing.
Correct. Exactly.
And realizing guys like you and me, we're not like we're not, you know, aluminum cone heads walking around in the desert worshiping a sunbeam. Like this stuff's really happening. It's time to wake up.
Oh, it's happening.
Yeah,
I mean, I could tell you story after story after story from people that have come to speak at our events that have just enlightened me beyond measure.
Well, I'll be at the next one. Here's how I would like to kind of, I think, wrap this up, because I feel like we've planted the seeds of at least 5 more conversations here.
Probably so.
But so how is this currently impacting the average person? And how is this currently creating opportunity for the average person? And by the way, I hate the term the average person, so forgive me for using it. But yeah, let's end by answering that kind of paired question.
So to answer the first one, how is this currently impacting the average person? It's not impacting the average person. And that's why I think that it's flying under the radar, because those applications right now are being built. It's kind of like, you know, iPhone was released, you know, the iPod was released, but about 2 years before that, you know, they're in a lab building it.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's there, and now it's impacting society. And then, you know, sure enough, you know, the 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, 10 years after that, it's dramatically impacted society. So right now it's not. There are applications that you can start using. You know, so like, you know, there's different applications, like I can get on and trade, you know, digital currency in an instant. Whereas 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was a lot more arduous process.
Right.
Where is the opportunity? I think that was your second question. Or how is there an opportunity right now? There's enormous opportunity. Now, I'm not just saying, okay, now that I've said, hey, go buy some Bitcoin, you know, take every dollar you own and go buy Bitcoin. I'm not suggesting that. That would not be a smart thing to do. Do not do that. But what I will say is educate yourself. And there's tons of resources out there now that are, you know, available everywhere, where you can start getting an understanding of what Bitcoin is, why blockchain is so important. And, you know, just starting there. What I would recommend is for some people, just buy a nominal amount of it and just understand it. Like, hey, how does it work? Like, how easy is it? Can I send it back and forth with, you know, where can I send this? What can I do with it? Because there are businesses that accept Bitcoin, right? There are utilities where I can literally pay with Bitcoin, and on the other side of the transaction, it's immediately turned to US dollars and it's settled. So those utilities now exist. 3, 4, 5 years ago, they did not.
So whatever somebody's current budget is in the next 12 months for fantasy sports leagues,
bingo.
let's put that into cryptocurrency
Bingo.
instead.
If you spend $100 in your fantasy sports leagues, put $100 in Bitcoin.
Live on the edge, take a gamble. Yeah. And,
it's, I bought my stepson, I gave him Bitcoin for Thanksgiving. Well, his birthday's like right around Thanksgiving. So I gave, I go, tell you what, I'm going to send you some Bitcoin. And just so you learn how to use the wallet and all that kind of stuff, right? That was 2 years ago. And that was even in the bull market, you know, kind of going up like this. And it's still worth more than what it was when I gave it to him. And I said, listen, I go, you know, there could be a day in your lifetime when that small nominal amount that I gave you for your birthday funds your retirement.
Right.
Like that's how significant this potential is possible.
So what we'll do, and the nice thing about recording a video like this is there's going to be a text area below the video where we can put resources. And so as we dig up, you know, first of all, I'm going to suggest, if you don't have it yet, let's get a link so people can actually come to your event, buy tickets. Yep. We'll get that below the video. It may not be there right away on day one, but we'll get that. You know, we'll probably dig up a few good resources that we feel confident in, at least suggesting for for further education. And we'll you know, go from there, and we'll continue this conversation. I suspect this is not the last interview that we'll do, because I suspect that this video is going to get really good feedback and there's going to be demand for more, and I'm going to call you again.
I'm happy to come back on, Jeff, anytime.
Okay. Awesome. Well, let's wrap it there. Dominic, so good to reconnect and this time stay connected.
Yes.
And thanks for coming out and sharing just not only education or information, but just yourself too. I think your story is really inspiring for people.
Thank you.
Maybe you haven't fully embraced that about your own life, but like your story has a huge inspirational component for people. So, you know, as the inspiration guy, I like encourage you to follow that and see where it leads. But just thanks, man. Thanks for being here.
Dude, the honor is all mine. I appreciate it, Jeff, beyond words, beyond measure. It was so great to see you in Nashville, and I'm looking forward to seeing you more often.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. Okay, and so for everyone, if this is your first exposure to my channel, Dominic, bear with me. I got to do my standard outro here. If this is your first exposure to my channel, this is the kind of stuff that we talk about. It's about how to change your life, how to embrace new skills, new growth, new opportunities, the new economy, the way the world has changed, you know, going to school, borrowing a bunch of money, spending decades paying off student debt, spending more decades working in a job, hopefully retiring with a little bit of time left. That is not, I'm not saying that's even necessarily a terrible option, but it's not the only option anymore. You have to get educated. And my channel's trying to move the world in that direction. So if this is your first time seeing me, I'll ask you to hit the subscribe button and just support what we're doing here. Make sure to hit the bell so you get notified as new videos come out. And we'll be bringing you more amazing content that I'm sure in the future will again include my good friend, Dominic Hrabe. Thank you, world. Thanks, Dom.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it, Jeff.